Alrighty, here we go. Now, the idea here is that we want to make sure that you can be ready for the test that's going to be tomorrow. So, test 14 review, here you go. So, what we're trying to do is try to make sure that you're understanding and ready for this test. Now, keep in mind, a lot of this is still building off factoring, stuff that you've been, that you started learning back in Algebra 1 and you're still learning. So, let's look at some of those factoring rules. First off, let's talk about sum and difference of two cubes. Okay, so the idea here, excuse me, if you're saying something is cubed, if it's two terms, look at it, that is two terms, then is it a cube? Okay, like x cubed plus something, x cubed minus something, then you follow a specific formula. Keep in mind your perfect cubes, okay? Your perfect cubes are like 2 cubed, 3 cubed, 4 cubed, 5 cubed, so on and so forth. What I again would recommend is make sure you have your cubes on a table because there's only so many cubes you can have. So, I would make sure I have it on a table, okay? And then have this formula. So, for example, this is not in the booklet or whatever, but let's say if I say x cubed minus change my mind, plus 1728, okay, the cube root according to that table of 1728 is 12, the cube root of x cubed is x, and thus I can go like this, these two should always match, and then x squared, 12 squared, and then 12 times x, and oops, not if the other one was a plus, then this one's a minus. And there you go. Even if I did something kind of crazy, like let's say y to the 6 minus 512, I'll do this one. If you want to take the cube root of something like this with an exponent, divide it by that root. Okay, so we want to take the cube root, so divide 6 by 3, you get y squared. Cube root of 512 is 8. These signs need to match. Then square the y to the 4th. Notice y squared, y 4th gives you y 6. 8 squared is 64. And then you got negative 8y. Oops, sorry, positive, because these signs should always be opposites. There you go. Okay, so kind of keep that in mind. Also, and I have it here, but with problems, keep in mind that if I have an equation or a function in quadratic form, I can go to those simple factoring rules of plus plus is plus plus in parentheses, minus plus is minus minus, plus minus is plus minus, minus minus is minus plus. Bigger number goes in the left parentheses, and you add for the top two and subtract for the second two. Okay, so what does that mean? I'm going to do these slightly out of order, but if you look at number 3, and you can see there that I can factor out this x squared because each of these have a greatest common factor. So when you have 3 terms, look for maybe a greatest common factor or see if it's in quadratic form. Okay, I take out the x squared, and now I'm left with an x squared plus 7x minus 60. This right here in parentheses, the x squared minus 7x plus 7x minus 60 is quadratic form. So that means I can go split it up into 2 separate parentheses, x, plus minus is plus minus, 2 numbers that multiply to give you 60, subtract to give you 7 is 12 and 5. And now I have this fully factored out, and there's my answer. Yippee. Okay, so kind of keep those in mind. If it has 2 terms, again, remember that's a probably sum or difference of 2 cubes. That one's 2 cubes. Okay, difference of. So I'm going to go like this. X, cube root of 729 is 9. And then I'm going to say x squared. 9 squared is 81. There's always a plus there on that last one. And then 9 times x is 9x. Keep the sign the same. So that's a minus, and then opposite to the next one. And there you go. And that's it. See, these should be fairly simple. Now, if they have 4 terms, separate them like that, 2 and 2. Notice I can take out x squared in the first parenthesis, so I'm going to take out an x squared. That leaves me with an x plus 5. Oh, and I made a typo on this. This should have just been a 1. So consider that a 1, because I oopsed. Just go with that. All right. If I write x plus 5 in the first parentheses, I need to write x plus 5 in the second parentheses. So factor by grouping, you always have a repeating parentheses. 5 divided by 5, so I divide these two. 5 divided by 5 is 1. Okay, and so now I can say, okay, my repeater is x plus 5. The ones that were outside the repeaters, x squared and 1, go together, and I am done. And there is factoring. Now notice, these say just a factor. Okay, so keep that in mind. Okay, notice on the next one, number 4, now these are factoring and then find all the roots, which means you've got to solve. So, okay, we're going to solve. This right here is 3 terms. So that means it's in it's either going to be, I take out the greatest common factor, or it's in quadratic form. In this case, you got an x to the 4th and x squared and just a number, so this is quadratic form, which means I can start doing the parentheses, split the x to the 4th up into 2 equal groups, x squared, and then I'm going to say minus minus. I'm going to go to yellow, so give me a second here. Minus minus is a minus plus. Okay, so now I'm looking for 2 numbers that multiply to give me 22, subtract to give me a 9. So again, I'm like doing like this, the negative 22, negative 9, and I would get 11 and 2. Remember, the bigger number always goes to the bigger sign, or to that left parentheses. All right. So now I'm going to say x squared minus 11 equals 0. See, if this was just factoring, I would be done, unless that 11 had was a perfect square. X squared plus 2 is equal to 0. Move the 11 over, and it becomes x squared is equal to 11. Take the square root, because that's what you got to do next. So I'm going to do that in a different color so you can kind of tell this is what I did next. Take the square root, and then that means I'm saying x is equal to plus or minus. There is no perfect square root of 11, so I say 11, square root of 11. Move this 2 over, and that's going to be x squared minus equals negative 2. I'm going to do the same thing, take a square root. But because of that negative, you got to remember that you should always put, okay, plus and minus always, then an I square root of 2. And that's where I get my 4 answers in a funky way. Okay, now the next one after that is factor by grouping. You put them together like that. Here I can take out an x squared, and I'm left with x plus 6. Repeat and write x plus 6. And then I've got to say, if I say negative 36 divided by 6, I would get negative 6. So now I've got x plus 6, and I've got x squared minus 6, and that's equal to 0. So now I'm going to say, well, x plus 6 equal to 0 is negative 6, because you just move it over and you're done. But this one is x squared minus 6 equals 0. You move the 6 over, and you've got x squared is equal to 6. Take the square root, and you're saying x is equal to plus or minus square root of 6. And that's it. And there's your 3 answers. The more difficult one is number 6, so let me talk about that one. Okay, so number 6, here you can see it's already in factored form. Okay, so I factored using the formula for a sum of, or difference of 2 cubes, and I've got that. Now the x minus 6 is easy. All I got to do is say that's equal to 0, so then move the negative 6 over to the other side and it becomes positive 6. That one's easy. The second one is the harder one. The second one you have to use quadratic formula, and then you've got to say, identify what's a, what's b, what's c. So I'm going to say, you're going to use that negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all of that over to a, plug in the numbers where you go, you got a, b, c right there, plug them in, kind of keep going from there. I wish my little thing would go faster, but apparently it's on a slower play rate, and I'm going, you're going too slow. Anyways, do this, and then you end up with x is equal to negative 6 plus or minus square root of negative 108 over 2. If you stop there, I would be okay with it. Now, you can further simplify that to where it would be negative 6 plus or minus 6i square root of 3 over 2, and both the 6's can be divisible by 2, so I would be okay with that. If you left it to me with what's boxed in, I would count it right. If you can get it to me like this, I would give you extra points. I don't know how many, it depends on how many problems I get, okay? Anyways, it's starting to get long and I want to make sure I finish. So let's look at the next one. Okay, synthetic substitution I think is some of the easiest ones you can do. Just remember, when you see these numbers in parentheses, they go into the synthetic division thingamabobby, whatchamacallit, whatever you want to say, as is. In other words, don't change the sign. So -2 in the parentheses means I'm putting -2 here. So this is doing like that. Notice that I also put a 0 because it goes x cubed, x squared, x. I still need a number. Once you establish whatever your highest exponent is, make sure you put zeros for those things that are missing, the terms that are missing. So in this case, I was missing just a regular number, so I had to still put a 0 there. So I go through all this, and I end up with a -36. So f of -2 is equal to -36. Notice for number 8, you've got a 0 here because it was missing the x cubed. When x to the fourth, x squared, x number, I need to have x to the fourth, x cubed, x squared, x number. So now if I carry this one out, why am I still doing this in yellow? I have no flipping clue. No more. Okay, 2 down, 2 times 3 is 6, 6 plus 0 is 6, 6 times 3 is 18, 18 minus 5 is 13, 13 times 3 is 39, 39 plus 3 is 42, 42 times 3 is 6, 126 subtracted by 11, and you get 115. So f of 3 is 115. And then number 9, same idea. So same idea here. I'll bring down 3. 3 times -4 is -12. That gives me -16. -16 times 4 is +64. +64, that would be 67. -67 times -4 would be 28. Carry the 2. -268. Ooh, we're getting some funky numbers here. -268 minus 5 would be -273. And then I would multiply that times a -4 and get, that's 12, carry the 1, that's 29, carry the 2, 1,092 positive, subtracted by 3, which would give me 1,089. So f of -4 is 1,089. So again, hopefully those should not be very hard. I mean, that should be easy points right there, and you can kind of go from there. Then the last part, we're going to use synthetic division. And I've already shown you an answer, but let me go ahead and erase that. Nice try. Okay, so notice here how this is not in parentheses, this x plus 3. This is the one you're going to divide by. It's after the semicolon. So when you put it in here, if it says +3, this one switches, that's -3. Then you've got 1, -1, -8, and 12. And I break it down. I'm seeing this one, I want to see, is it going to equal 0? So 1, -3, 1 times 3 is, or 1 times -3 is -3, that's -4. -3 times a -4 is +12. -8 plus 12 is 4. The -3 times 4 is -12, and I get a remainder of 0. So since I'm saying a remainder of 0, my answer is yes, this is a factor. And then I need to break this down. This is x squared minus 4x plus 4. Notice how those numbers relate. And I'm saying x plus 3 is a factor. So now I need to factor this right here, and I'm going to do this off to the side here. So x squared minus plus is minus minus. So x plus 3. And then I've got x minus, x minus. I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to give me a 4 and add up to 4, which is 2. And there you go. You're done with that problem. If you look at the next one, number 11, I'm going to say +4, and I got 4, -12, -1, and 3. Bring down the 4. 4 times 4 is 16. 16 minus 12 is 4. 4 times 4 again is 16. 16 minus 1 is 15. 15 times 4 is 60. 60 plus 3 is 63. Did I get an answer of 0? No, so I would say no, and I'm done. Because if this doesn't come out to a 0, then I can't factor like I did on number 10. Okay, so for number 12, and since somebody asked, like, because they were asking if there was going to be a secret word, why not? I'll put in a secret word, but I'm doing it now. So what's the secret word for today? That's a good question. Let's go with dynamo. Today's secret word, kiddos, is dynamo. Please write that above your name for some extra points on your test. Thank you. All right, so now getting back to this. Number 12 is a special one because you have this 3 in front of the x. You cannot have any numbers in front of the x. So you have to first divide by 3. And if you're going to divide by 3, which will give you x minus 2/3, you got to divide the function by 3, which will give you 2x cubed plus 5/3 x squared minus 1 minus 2/3. I know it's got fractions. Deal with it. You'll be okay. So notice I'm going to work with the fractions. I'm showing you all the work here. And it's going to go through its little process. Bring down the 2. 2 times 2/3 is 4/3. 4/3 plus 5/3 is 9/3, which if you take those two fractions in the calculator and add them, it will probably just tell you straight out 3. 3 times 2/3 is 2. 2 minus 1 is 1. 2/3 times 1 is 2/3. And that's 0. So guess what? This is a factor. So your answer here is yes. It's a factor. Then, hold a second. I need some more space. So here you go. So notice that the first parentheses is my original factor, what I divided by, and then the 2x squared plus 3x plus 1 is my answer. Now I need to factor 2x squared plus 3x plus 1, which again involves special factor rules that we had to say 2x into both parentheses. Plus plus is plus plus. I'm looking for, and then don't forget, you multiply the two end numbers. So I'm not looking for two numbers that multiply to give me 1 and add up to 3. I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to give me 2 and add up to 3, which is 2 and 1. Now, you're going to have, when you do this method, don't forget there's an extra number, like an extra 2 that you need to divide out. And notice the first parentheses I can divide, or the second parentheses, this middle parentheses, I can divide by 2, and I get x plus 1, and then I have 2x plus 1. So my final answer is 3x squared plus x plus 1, 2x plus 1. Okay? Final question. Yay! Okay, so here's 13, and you can see how it's set up. I'm trying to make sure it's all set up for you. You go through the process of doing your synthetic division. Notice this one was really long, but it's done in a purposeful way that you end up with a quadratic form equation. So yes, this is a yes, and then you're going to say, well, x minus 4, in the second parentheses you've got x to the 4th, no x cubed, plus x squared, minus 20, because there was no x, and then realize that x to the 4th can be split up to x squared, plus minus is plus minus, two numbers that multiply to give me 5, and subtract to give me a 1, I'm sorry, multiply to give me 20, subtract to give me a 1, is 5 and 4. If you have x squared plus a number, you cannot do anything with that. If you have x squared minus a number, see if that number you can take the square root of, which you can take the square root of 4, and then further factor that. So when I say x squared minus 4, I can say x plus, x minus, square root of 4 is 2, and you go from there. So keep that in mind, and you should be fine. So don't forget, we're going to add one thing here. Do not forget that there is also difference of two squares. Difference of two squares says if you have a squared minus b squared is equal to the square root of a squared and b squared, so a plus b, a minus b. In other words, if I say x squared minus 36, I'm going to factor that. I'm going to say x plus, x minus, and then what's the square root of 36? 6, and you're done. But if it were to say x squared plus 36, I do nothing. If it says x squared minus some other number that's not a perfect square, leave it alone. You do nothing. Okay? That's it for today. Good luck on the test. I think y'all will do well because I know y'all can be amazing. Thank you so much. Y'all take care.